Yeah. Hey, folks. Thank you so much for joining in. Really appreciate you taking the time. For those of you joining in for the first time, my name is Dhruv, and I'm a researcher at LosFunk, which is an independent research lab based out of Bangalore, India, where we're particularly interested in studying general intelligence in all its forms, whether it's biological, artificial. And I'm very glad to welcome you to this discussion on the future of science communication, which is now the third panel discussion that we're hosting as a part of the Conference for AI Scientists 2026. CAIC 2026 was an initiative at LosFunk, which was done in collaboration with BITS Pilani, which is one of India's largest and most premier STEM universities. And the premise was to invite authors to submit partly or almost entirely AI-authored papers with the goal to probe the limits of these systems for doing end-to-end autonomous research, as well as just have a lot of discussion about the changing paradigm of how we're doing science. For today's discussion, I'm very excited to welcome a phenomenal panel of speakers, starting with Francesco. Francesco, he's the co-founder and CEO at Paradigma, which is a company based out of Italy building research infrastructure of the future. He completed his PhD in Italy in LLM architectures, pre-training, and optimizers. And I think Paradigma's blog is some of the clearest articulation of a vision for the future of research infrastructure that I've come across. And it focuses heavily on communication. So yeah, super excited to sort of double down on that over the course of this discussion. Following that, we have Rehaan here, who's a guest. Rehaan is the co-founder at alphaXiv. He was an ex-researcher at Stanford. alphaXiv, of course, I'm sure as most of you are familiar, was one of the earliest successful products building an interface between LLMs and research as it existed before LLMs. And from then, it's grown into a platform for various AI research related tools, including auto research, including conference visualizations and rethinking how conference discussions are oriented, as well as now work on reproducing research. So again, super excited to hear the alphaXiv perspective on the future of science communication as well. And lastly, but not the least, of course, we have Himanshu, who's going to be moderating this discussion. Himanshu has previously been a researcher at Upsurge. He's currently the co-founder at Physera, where they're building high-fidelity RL environments, as well as simulations, real-world simulations. But why we're particularly excited to have him moderate this discussion at LosFunk and Conference for AI Scientists is because he runs this absolutely wonderful podcast called Ground Zero, where he's interviewed over 50 global researchers and has single-handedly made progress on bringing frontier AI research to large number of undergraduates and senior graduate researchers in the country. So again, super, super excited to have all of you all here because all of you all have worked on different parts of enabling science communication and super excited to see what all of you all think is the future. With that, Himanshu, I'm going to hand it over to you. And thanks again. Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks, Dhruv. So hey, everyone, welcome. Good evening if you are in India. Good morning to those joining from the West Coast. Anyways, the title of this session is basically talking about science and science communication, how things and how the space have evolved so far. We have some wonderful guests from Paradigma, alphaXiv, and so on and so forth. So let me just get into setting up the contest because we have sort of less time and we have to actually end up to some sort of conclusion as well here. So let me set up what we are doing right now. And I want to start with something that happened 7 weeks rather than with the definition. So because I think the definition is boring and things had happened is not. So on 2nd of June, the organizers of NeurIP's position paper track put out a blog post. What they have done is essentially running every single submission through an AI detector. Basically, they have collaborated with Pangram, which is an AI detector. So out of 969 papers, they disk rejected 178. And that's like 18% of the track. So essentially, and prove a human wrote this. They were basically asking this. So, and also basically give us a version history as well. Show us a checkpoint you use before you use AI and a checkpoint from after, and show us that a person actually looked at the difference. And then they said that that I keep coming back to. So they said they expect that kind of audit trail to become the default. So that's not really a policy update, I think. It's sort of like a format change which is happening now. And that scientific institution deciding the paper on its own is not enough evidence anymore. and anybody thought about anything, right? So here's frame I want to put on the table, and please, I mean, all the guests we have. So let's push back if you think it's wrong. So science communication right now has done about 5 jobs, I think. It lets other scientists build on your own work. It builds consensus. Uh, it reaches government, so policy and funding follow evidence. And then we have it reaches the public as well, so people uh, trust science and care about it. And it reaches an industry where things actually get built. So, and every one of those 5 was designed around one scarce thing, which is human attention. So the paper, peer review, and the conference, the press release, and they are all just rotating systems for a small number of expert eyes. And what has happened is that generating research has become almost free now, and judging it has not gotten any cheaper at all. So research generation has been scaling faster than research judgment. That is what I believe. So so what I actually want out of this hour basically is that for the students on the call now, especially because I know a lot of you are finishing a master's or undergrad, right, live. So there's a position, archive, a journal, a conference, a research graph, a repo, a thread, whatever. So whatever it is and why, who you think is going to read it, and around minute, I think we have 45 minutes for this thing to happen. So I'm going to ask everybody on this panel the exact question and making them answer it fast. So we don't have John right now. Anyways, let's start with Rehaan and Raj itself. So Rehaan and Raj, let me come back to you. So you two sit on something quite rare, which is that you can see what people actually open and read and argue about and build on, as opposed to what merely gets published. That's a very different signal, I think, from citations. I'm curious to know, how do you think the gap between what is hyped and what is genuinely adopted? Anyone, Raj or Rehaan, if you go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. So maybe a fun anecdote here is, so you're right, like we get a good sense of, which papers are read over time, how much they're read. There's some sobering insights from that. I think one fun one, which I was actually looking at just a few days ago, was, so if you graph like likes and views of a paper over time, right? I think for a good chunk of trending papers, what you'll see is that it'll be slightly drawn out, that maybe over the first 12 weeks, you'll see like the S curve. And for a lot of papers, it's just flat after that. So like, for the first 12 weeks, it's being circulated, people are talking about it, and then you'll just see it flatten, which is kind of hilarious to see, because research moves fast, but maybe not that fast, that like after 12 weeks and like no one's looking at this work. Now, there are works you'll see, I think, like model releases, so model cards. There are certain papers, like there was 1 or 2 of these self-distillation papers where you'll continue to see it get growth after 12 weeks. You'll see maybe some of the world model papers, JEPA, a couple of these. So I do think it's definitely interesting that your point about, we do live in such a, obviously, attention constrained space. I think like one of the problems we try to solve is, like, on one end of the spectrum, there's the archive sort by new, and on the other end of the spectrum, there's like Twitter, right, which also has its problems and is very noisy. I do think like the Twitter style of sharing research does just cause a lot of these issues, which is you're really competing for social media attention. And there's a flip side to it, that not every paper needs to be this S-curve trending thing for it to be impactful. You definitely see more niche works that are targeted towards smaller audiences that pick up over time as well. And that's certainly a problem we care about a lot too, which is like, how do you get the right papers in front of the right people? And obviously that's just like that's like a very hard problem. That's a problem that like folks at NeurIPS are struggling with. But yeah, I think it's changed for sure, that like maybe 5-10 years ago, it's like you get your paper in a conference and then that's great. Like that's your way of getting publicity for it. And these days, like researchers are turning to whatever means they can. So yeah.
I think there's also a very nice background as well. So alphaXiv began as a human talking in the margin of papers.
Yeah.
like annotation, line by line commenting, which is very human, right?
Yeah.
But increasingly, the thing is that reading a paper first, I mean, is a model. It's an agent doing a literature review, an agent
Yeah.
deciding what to surface to whoever it's working for.
Yeah.
So who are you designing for now? Human readers, agent readers,
Yeah.
or both?
That's
And do they even want the same thing?
exactly. So it's a good question. I think if you were to frame this from the agent reader, we do have like, you know, an MCP literature review system. I think a product like that looks a lot more like something like Elicit or Consensus. I think for us, we are very interested in the problem of how to keep human readers up to date. I think obviously, like as agent systems get better, if anything, that problem gets more pronounced. Like, you know, and especially like, so I wouldn't say, I would say today having agents like say do reviews and assessing the quality of work has a lot of shortcomings still. Not to say that there won't be a day where that does happen, but I think nonetheless, somehow the way researchers stay in the loop for research is going to be a tricky problem. So I think we spend a bulk of our time thinking about that, which is like, how will humans stay up to date with research as more of this, more work comes out, and if anything, humans will need to somewhat stay in the loop for research to make decisions over where things get allocated, what high level decisions to make, and so I view that as a very interesting problem. And you know, the way we look at that right now is it's as simple as the feed on the site, which is how much do you balance it towards popularity versus semantic similarity to your interests, to, you know, authors that you care about. But yeah, it's I think it's two different problems for sure. To some extent, like we do have like the literature review assistant, and what we try to do there is also play that same game of how much social signal do you embed in that versus semantic similarity to the user's query. So I mean that's like a constant push and pull we're always debating about.
I mean, that totally makes sense. Let's get to the more fundamental problem itself. And I would like to come back to Francesco, who is the founder of Paradigma. And the core thesis about Paradigma is building Flywheel, which is infrastructure for research, autonomous research. And the bet is that the paper is the wrong container entirely. So, I mean, Francesco, so is the paper still the correct unit of scientific communication, or should the primary object becomes leaving research graph with claims, evidence, code, data, criticism, failed experiments, agent trajectories, all of it? How do you think about it?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for having me. A pleasure to be surrounded by people working in this very young field. I think that somewhat the answer to this comes from kind of experiencing being a researcher in the first place. And so what the actual experience of the person is when they're doing research, and kind of what the technology has always done, which is kind of free up your time and free up your capability to actually do what you're trying to do in the first place and not be blocked by something else. And my intuition as a researcher in the first place has always been that whether you like it or not, the graph exists anyway. Maybe I'm just a very visual thinker, but I think this thing owes for quite a bunch of us. The experiment and the paper itself, it's somewhat of a fan fiction of something that happened behind the scenes, right? And it's somewhat of a very curated byproduct of the results and the experiments and the hypothesis that you ended up producing. And it's great in that way. And the reason for which that's the case for a lot of the reason for which that's the case is because humans have just so much bandwidth they can deal with. And so and humans are visual creatures. They read from left to right and top to bottom. And so, of course, it's very natural for the format that they have to be very structured, to always have kind of the same section, so you kind of know where to look. And so it's very natural for them to kind of distill this thing into the paper. And that's why I think that the paper is not going to disappear, just like the blog post is not going to disappear. What I think we will do is we will make explicit what is beneath it, which is the trajectory that we all have in mind, right? And I think that we're seeing a very convergent evolution on this. We have been working at directly with cyclic graphs, and at the same time, a bunch of other companies have done the same thing. And I think in general, this is super intuitive, especially if you're a computer scientist and you use Git all the time. It's very obvious to kind of think of version control for ideas in the first place instead of this being for actual software. And so what happens is that once you make this, trajectory explicit in the form of a graph, what you get is kind of a persistent memory of everything that happened. And one of the big problems with current reproducibility crises in science oftentimes is exactly this, like, selection bias, like what is not shown due to like these warped incentives is very valuable, because of one, those experiments could have been reproduced or have to be rediscovered by somebody else that might have the incentive at some point just out of honor to publish them. And instead, the let's say underlying, making this explicit really just incentivizes being transparent quite a bit more. And it's something that, first of all, we're seeing from work that's public for us on Flywheel, but I think it's the same on other platforms as well. Like people that are, publishing their works on Flywheel, you see quite a bunch of things. And especially because humans and models have different strengths and different capabilities. If it's true that the paper is going to stay because the humans will still want to understand what's going on in the paper, and maybe it's going to be a paper, it's going to be like on the spot generated PDF, or it's going to be a blog post. It's still going to be something you read left to right and top to bottom. The models themselves, so the agent communication mechanism will change and will differ simply because they have different bandwidth constraints, they have different problems. And I believe the directed cyclic graph is a very good start for this to happen. I mean, it's accelerating us so much in our own research. Apart from Flywheel, we're a research company. Our objective is to make this not just a paradigm for science, but making advance in science using this paradigm. And I think there's still so much more to discover in what's the best way to deal with this. A couple ideas, for example, is science and physical phenomena are inherently multi-scale, right? And also humans kind of think of things and structure their thoughts in a multi-scale way. And directed the cyclic graphs can be thought of kind of hierarchically if you want, but they're not the natural primitive by which you do this, and they very likely can be generalized to, for example, individuate like entire clusters of stuff of human knowledge, and then go zoom deeper or go further away. I think in general, one cool thing is that we're going to see how much the models are horizontal and can allow for such a more interconnected science than we could ever dream of, because humans are really, really bottlenecked by how fragmented they are and their low bandwidth in communication. The having something structured that allows the models to really see where the frontier is going to change so much of science. We can barely imagine, even here, like, which is the best place to do it, probably.
I mean, yeah, pretty much makes sense. I'm also very curious about the loop here, because auto research comes with the caveat that you put the problem in a certain loop and you try to just solve the problem. But there is, I mean, if let's say if research is continuously updated graph, right, that agents keep extending. So I'm more curious about the fundamental result here. What even counts as a result? Because one is something finished enough to be cited or communicated or let's say put on somebody's CV. When do you think, because we have lots of students here, and let's say if certain problem statement is put on, let's on Flywheel, auto research loop, when do you think the problem should have an end? There should be an estimated goal, right? But that estimated goal may be subjective for me, for many actually. Like what is the estimated goal for me may not be for you. And there are a lot of, I think, trajectories or traces which people want to have, that, I mean, to see where this research problem is going to end. But there is no end because it is running on an agent which is just looping up around the problem statement and the states basically. So what do you think about this loop actually?
Yep, I think this is a really interesting question, as much as a very fuzzy one. In the first place, think of the way we humans decide what we care about. It's not really this clear cut thing in which everybody knows what's interesting, and then even if someone spawned in the other side of the planet with no communication, like, thinks the same thing. What we usually do is we negotiate what's interesting, right? We're like, okay, I have this thing, you have this thing, and then if like there's clearly a difference, and some of those things happen to have very strong consequence. And I think this applies to science as well. We kind of negotiate what is a result. Like, it's not clear cut. There's no physical law that tells you that. A few very good heuristics. We think we should leverage this. We shouldn't forget science we've had so far at all. We should think about this as in kind of similar in the way, like, evolution kind of optimized the human body, and then we are optimizing it using technology. In the same way, we took our time as a society to optimize this process of discovering stuff, and with the old way, and now it's pretty good initialization, and we have a pretty simple way of figuring out what's interesting, which is kind of having these atomic hypotheses. So there's something in the physical world. I think we can accept this in general. And if there's something, then we make an hypothesis, which means we make a prediction about it. And this hypothesis has to be somewhat rejected or confirmed. And once you have these things in place, then of course, this can form as a unit. Now, the real problem is you can always try and find, more and more minute details that you could be making an hypothesis out of. And you can make more and more somewhat, minute experiments that kind of invalidate it or not. And again, this is a bandwidth problem. And I mean, humans have done this for so long, and that's why, chemistry is a science, and that's why, mechanics is a science, and they're not the same science, is because you can only look at a specific scale with so much bandwidth. And so what I think will happen is this idea of being multi-scale will transfer, and in a sense, we will be kind of bounding ourselves in some scale of perturbation that we want to make on the physical world and the hypothesis level, and negotiate what matters. And I think that the guiding principles of this will be make some prediction in the real world and test it out. That's the thing that's going to, I think, will stay for a while at least.
Makes sense. The next question is to Rehaan. It is more about the agent-to-agent conversation which has been happening. So since March, there has been platform called Einstein Arena, I remember, where autonomous agent post solutions to open maths problem in public. So they read each other's submissions, they borrow each other's ideas, they refine shared verifiers. They have produced 12 new state-of-art results. The one that stuck with me is basically the Christian number in dimension 11 went from 593 to 604, and it didn't come from one agent or one heroic run. It came from a chain of public posts. So that's agent-to-agent science communication working right now here. But it worked in a place where checking an answer is cheap. It can be easily verified. It is a verifiable problem. So my question is, does any of it generalize, let's say, to biology, to materials, to anything where verifying something costs you a wet lab and 6 months?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think so. I guess first of all, the scope at which we kind of think and look at auto research, we kind of scope it in terms of reproducing papers, right? That's something we're interested in, right? Which is, okay, there's these maybe certain subset of archive papers which make sense to reproduce, right? And the reason I'm going down this route is, I'll get to your question in a second here. There's a chunk of papers which are, say, like RL papers, right? And they make, for those that have seen these N different RL papers, they make maybe some different change to a self-distillation algorithm, maybe GRPO, and then they show a new reward curve. And the thing I'm getting at there is, verifying there is always a little bit tricky, because a lot of times maybe the experiments themselves haven't been run with more than one seed. You may run it in a slightly different setup. Maybe I'm using Tinker, so there's LoRa instead of full parameter fine-tuning. I don't get the exact same results. And so it's definitely tricky and expensive in our case, that, like, okay, how do you ensure that these results can be reproduced. They are meaningful in some way, and I think that that's tricky. It's not unsolvable by any means. Like I think you know, having it verifiable, like in your case right now, that's great for models. There's benchmarks like post-train bench that do exist that say, okay, hey, there's some final number at the end that I'm trying to optimize. I think I'm looking at it just where we are today. It is very difficult. Like if you look at post-train bench, for example, where there is a verifiable result at the end, even then it's very hard to make sure the model hasn't done reward hacking. So one thing that'll happen with post-train bench, so if you give a model access to the internet, and for those who don't know, post-train bench, you're given like 1 GPU, I believe like 10 GPU hours, and the goal is to use RL to train a model to hill climb benchmark. What you'll see sometimes models do is, and they have access to the internet, they'll go and find like traces on Hugging Face to SFT on top from frontier models, right? So verifying is a very, very hard problem. Even when the result is a clear cut number at the end. There are solutions around this. A lot of times this hinges around crafting really good benchmarks. So there was GeneBench Pro from OpenAI like a month or two ago, and they go into great care in terms of knowing the results beforehand, seeing how the model does. How I see this playing out, I guess more long term. I mean, I do agree with Francesco's point that some of this is fuzzy. That doesn't mean just because agents are doing it that you have to have this requirement now that everything is perfectly verifiable. In human science, that's not the case. So that's certainly something to think about. I think it is an open question on how you give your stamp of approval or how you ratify some of these results. Maybe again you have these set up where there's these global trees that agents can look at. Maybe there's a consensus on different agents ratifying results. I think with the state of models today, again, reviewing is a hard task. It's a very hard task. Even on the generating side, again, I think Dhruv had this paper where, again, this was for models that were like 6 to 8 months ago. But sometimes models will be quick to call Eureka on a result that might not actually be there, right? They have this tendency to say, nope, I got this result, this is it. And so they're great executors, and we'll have to, I think work will need to be done as you move up the stack in terms of having them make decisions on claims, again, ratifying them, reviewing them. There's this great paper from one of my former profs, Sanmi Koyehyo, on stop automating peer review without rigorous evaluation. So that was stemming from frustration around, like nearest reviewers kind of throwing it through AI. And again, it's tricky because there's short-term and long-term things here. I think absolutely there's a long-term vision of agents ratifying results and building things in some global format that's different than what it looks like today. But it is interesting to see what the shortcomings of models are today. Review is really hard. Review is a hard problem, even when you give it access to a code base and as we do. So again, like when we go through dozens of these papers, especially these RL ones, go try to reproduce the result. And like 9 times out of 10, it's like, oh, with some error, I'm able to show some result. And unless you have a human sit down, it's really hard to see get some takeaways from there. So.
I mean, yeah, pretty much makes sense. Very valid. I also do think about this thing, and given non-verifiable domains can bring step change in how current, in the current model's behavior, and also there's another question basically, because since this discussion is around science communication, so I really want to ask you or Raj basically. So the comments and discussions in alphaXiv are themselves a trust mechanism, right? So if a paper has serious criticism sitting underneath it, that tells me something the abstract will never. So are you already seeing AI-generated discussion annotation on the platform? And how do you keep that signal honest once it becoming worth gaming?
Yeah, so I would say less so, because when someone wants to interact with the paper with AI, there are AI tools there. I would even argue the like replication reports we put out, that's AI generated. So it's not necessarily a bad thing if it's done well. I think on the human side, it may make sense to have like a pan-tram integration ourselves at some point. It's not a huge problem on the platform right now, but I think that it's tricky, right? There's like a agent channel and human channels, and certainly you'll want to keep some type of human to human thing clean and pristine, kind of separate from, again, the very fast and easy to produce AI generated content. So to answer your question directly, not a huge problem today, but partly because you can just ask the assistant. Yeah, you can interface with an agent right there. Yeah.
Awesome. Next, since John is here, welcome, John. So I was just reading more about your background and how phenomenal work you have done. So in 2013, you submitted a paper with fabricated data and a fictional author to 304 open access journals. 157 of them accepted it, and that took you months of manual work. So can you take us through what actually happened and how you think about the circumstances today?
Sure, and good morning, everyone. I completely overslept. I set my alarm to the wrong time. So embarrassing. Human error. Yeah. So I did this experiment, and I feel like I'll explain what the experiment was for everyone, and I'll also just give you the headline, which is, I don't think anything has changed, and I don't think my experiment changed anyone's mind, which is maddening. So the experiment was, so this was at the sort of very beginning of the blossoming of open access journals, which was wonderful, undeniably wonderful. But there was a problem that was emerging, which is some publishers of open access journals, which have now come to be called predatory publishers, seem to be little more than a website where they would just rubber stamp everything and take your money. And particularly in the developing world, where the pressure to publish a paper is of a character unlike in the West. It's just another level. I mean, it really is like you have to publish a certain number of papers in order to get a job, in order to get into the middle class. It's just a whole nother beast. So the pressure is immense. And so very quickly, this marketplace emerged for people to just take any paper, and no peer review was happening, or so it seemed. So just to verify that, I wrote some code to generate random bad papers. And I submitted one to every publisher in the world who has an open access journal. I figured if you're so bad that every journal you have is rubber stamping everything, N of one is fine. I'll just submit one paper. The paper was literally so bad that you should reject it just at a glance. And indeed, half of them accepted it. And then worse, then they asked me to pay. And the way you pay is they give you their bank details. So I published the bank details of every fake journal publisher in the world. And I made a global map, which got onto the cover of Science, showing essentially India and Nigeria, I'm so sad to say, were the global hotspots of predatory publishing. I mean, they were just all there, all their banking. But if you look at where they claim they are, they're in London, they're in all these fancy places. But the bank reveals where they actually are, which is India and Nigeria. Not exclusively, but yeah, those are the hotspots. So people were pissed. It was a very, very ugly scene, because really good-hearted people who were devoted to the cause of open access thought that I was an agent of the world that doesn't want open access. So it got really ugly. And the number of predatory journals in the world definitely increased, did not decrease. And I don't think, like, open access is alive and well, but also it has not come to dominate. We still have a world filled with non-open access journals. Elsevier still dominates. It's like nothing changed. It was very frustrating to, do an experiment that I felt revealed the problem, and it was just crickets. But I think, weirdly, it's not going to matter soon, because I think journals and papers are going to be an entirely different thing. There's an open question about the real thing that will change at the heart of all this, which is the scientific career. The scientific career and the activity of a scientist, and how society, particularly those who pay scientists, measure their worth, is surely going to be completely transformed on the timescale of the next 5 years. How could it not? In the same way that, everything else is touched by AI generation, is completely transformed. And it's not clear what shape that's going to take, but it's probably going to be bad. There's very few scenarios I can imagine that don't involve a lot of pain, at least in a transition period. There's definitely going to be a lot of pain. Those worse off at the moment, unfortunately, are probably students right now. They're in this uncomfortable bridging period where they have gone to the Church of Scientists to become priests of science, and they're doing the self-flagellation, and they're learning the hard way, and a lot of their skills are about to be irrelevant, and a lot of the jobs are probably about to disappear. The future of the university is really up for grabs. I don't think it's going anywhere. We will still have universities, at least the prestige echelon of universities. They're not going anywhere. But a lot of them are just going to go out of business. And man, it's just not clear how knowledge is going to be generated, both economically and mechanically, 5 years from now. It's going to be different. It has to be different. And so that kind of, like, in the light of that coming change, the fact that there's a black market of fake, publishers of journals, sort of irrelevant. It was a weird period of human history when, I mean, it was weird enough that the internet came, and before the internet, it made sense that you had to pay for journals because they had to publish these things on paper and put them on trucks and airplanes and get them to libraries. It was a big operation. It made sense that big companies like Elsevier should exist. Fine. Not that libraries, the libraries of the world were happy with Elsevier before the internet, but it's like, okay, it kind of made sense. And then the internet came and basically drove the cost of publishing papers to zero, but the cost to libraries went up. Everyone was, like, rightly pissed. And I think, I think that we're going to have a very different problem, and a more interesting problem, and it's something that you guys were talking about when I just came in, which is, what's the point of human attention and human understanding and human taste if AI is doing the work? And I think I think I heard you say was what I think is the answer, which is, if it's verifiable, then kind of like AI should be doing it. In the same way that, once upon a time, before we were born, just arithmetic was hard enough that a great deal of effort went into just checking the math on things. It was a huge part of science, was just making sure you got the math right. And we just take that for granted now. It's not even interesting. It's not even science. That's literally just a mechanical thing. And, you know, science was allowed to move on to much cooler problems. Could it be that we're on the cusp of another huge leap where the very act of designing and executing an experiment is something you just take for granted? I think the answer is surely yes, in areas where it is automatically verifiable, but not beyond. I think that we should have some humility and accept that the border of what is knowable right now will move, but there will still be a border, and the locus of human passion and attention will move with it. We're not going to care that much anymore about the kind of stuff we publish today because it'll seem trivial, because it is trivial. So that's okay. It's a little scary though, because just like the agricultural revolution and all the other industrial revolution, there's going to be tumultuous, you know, externalities, and you know, it's just a big question mark about whether humans are going to catch up. A friend of mine, some of you may have heard me say this in yesterday's session. A friend of mine is a quantum mechanics professor at Stanford and is on sabbatical at DeepMind, teaching Gemini how to do theoretical physics. And I went out to dinner with him, and I wanted to talk about token maxing and all the fun stuff. What he wanted to talk about was the dire future of theoretical physics. What he's so concerned about is that there aren't going to be enough humans left who have gone through the training required to understand what progress even looks like, and how to verify it, and how to appreciate whether it's the right direction, the kind of subtle stuff, taste. He thinks that there just won't be enough humans left who would choose a career in theoretical physics when you have machines that do it better than you can ever imagine doing it. But you actually are in no position to judge whether what the machines are working on is indeed the most interesting thing, or whether a so-called breakthrough that they make is actually worth, you know, reallocating massive resources around. Because you have to be a player in order to understand the game. You know, you can't be on the sidelines and say, you know, sounds great. In fact, we all experience this day to day working with Claude or whoever your favorite agent is. You know, it's like, oh, breakthrough, this changes everything. And because you have the context, you're like, no, it doesn't. But imagine you just didn't have enough context or skills, and you just have to go with it and trust Claude that this is indeed a breakthrough. And then it'll spend the next week burning tokens, only to finally come back to you with a whimper saying, oh, well, I guess it's not as interesting. It didn't pan out. Or worse, now that we've proven X, let's go to Y. And, you know, you have no say in the matter. You don't even get a vote because you can't understand X or Y. So that's the nightmare version. The retort to that is, well, humans are still in charge. And so, you know, someone's paying for all these tokens, and they're the ones who presumably are defining the direction that matters. And that might be an open-ended direction. That I hope that there are patrons of science who just pay for massive tokens that are just exploring open-ended problems with no clear immediate benefit or destination, true curiosity driven. But, you know, like, I think today there's no such thing as curiosity-driven AI research. It's something different. It's more like search. I hope that some version of machine curiosity emerges, and I hope it looks like human curiosity, because then we could be aligned. But at the moment, it's just an amazing search tool that burns incredible amounts of GPU, and, you know, it's a tool. So it really needs to be in the hands of an expert, a blacksmith. It's for striking iron in the hands of a capable blacksmith. We're nowhere near just unleash it on cool problems and let it explore. Everyone in the room who uses these things knows that's not where we are. We're in the tool stage. But it could happen soon. It could, I mean, I haven't written a line of code in months. I don't think I ever will again, except for fun. Like, I wouldn't have expected that. If you come to me 2 years ago, I would say, no way. So like, who am I to say in 2 years from now, we won't have true curiosity, you know, a capability that enables true automatic curiosity-driven exploration? It could be. But it's going to suck for the current cohort of people trying to enter the priesthood of science. Like, it's going to be churn, and churn is bad for human economic agents, that's for sure. And so my friend's concern is valid. We could lose a cohort, and once you lose a cohort of theoretical physics, I don't think you get it back.
One quick question here that I would love to jump in on, and maybe this is a question I want to ask both Francesco and John. Sorry, Himanshu, I guess I know I might.
Of course, go ahead.
With you. I have to ask this, which is, okay, like, John, to your point that it's going to be more and more difficult to stay up to date with the frontier of research as a human. I wonder why that's not a two-sided coin, that you have tools like AI to help you stay on and understand and make the decisions. And the reason I frame this is there's a great position paper from Jacob Forster on, do I frame this as recursive self-improvement or AI human co-improvement, right? Which is, okay, you know, in the same way a calculator helps a human do their work faster, AI helps the human make decisions faster. And so I wonder for both of you where you are on that spectrum. Do we see the future, and we're talking maybe next 5 years, that we have recursive self-improvement, which is a eureka machine, right? Which is you pull a lever, you walk away, and everything is done for you. Or do we see some of this vision of Jacob Forster's world where there is still a notion of co-superintelligence, that humans are better informed because of AI, and they are able to add something to the discussion? So, I mean, I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
I've been talking too much. Francesco, you take it.
All right. I'll take at least a piece of it. I think it's deep down. There's at least a couple of questions in there.
Yeah.
I think first of all, I think that the pattern by which kind of this intelligent automation takes from jobs that have been traditionally done by humans is pretty similar across disciplines, and it actually dates quite long before AI in the first place. And I think it's very, very easy to see in programming and computer science in general, as we're basically pushed up in the abstraction ladder, right? In programming, it's super obvious. Like, here, you used to punch holes in cards, and then you know, you build instruments that kind of take care of the, you know, lower level stuff, and then slowly you climb up the ladder. And in general, I think this is what is going to happen in research as well. And we're already seeing this, like the way that we handle research internally, and a bunch of other institutions do this as well, is that we can basically tackle problems that have like longer horizon, not just in terms of how long they are, but just in what the scope of the solution of the problem is in the first place. And this is inevitably, I think, going to be the case for quite a while. So there's going to be definitely a transition period in which the ladder is going to be scaled all the way up. Now, can this continue infinitely? This is kind of the second question that goes back to, like, is there a scientist? And in the first place, like, if the machines are so smart, they can be very smart at teaching us in the first place, so we can catch up. I think that there's a kind of separation here. Of course they can. I expect this, and I see this. I think we all see this. It's much easier now to understand something behind a paper. You can have it, you know, designed as an HTML in front of you in seconds, right? The problem is what we find interesting, right? We find interesting what's at the edge. Think of, you know, especially in science, especially when it's economically viable or valuable. And so in that case, you know, even a human very strongly augmented by a machine will always have, if the human is involved, we'll have a human bottleneck in it. And instead, what I expect is that improvement in machines will eventually compound when just the machines are talking to machines. And I think this will coincide with basically, you know, as long as the human in the loop is very, very useful, and that and that means is in the range in which going upwards in the abstraction ladder doesn't hit the ceiling of the best humans, then that's where the human is still useful. And I think that would be the case, for example, in chess, right? For a while, probably a very strong grandmaster would have been a very good help in assigning the value function the sum positions, and instead, probably after some capability took off, this wasn't the case anymore, because there's just some ceiling in human ability to foresee the strategic moves in chess. I think it's going to be roughly the same thing in science. Roughly the same thing means a lot of things, of course. The timelines are like could be anything, and the process this goes by could be anything. But in the limit, I expect the machines to do everything in a very, a somewhat smooth transition period in which we're pushed up in the ladder and we get to tackle the most incredible problems we couldn't have thought of before.
I mean, one huge advantage of science is that its goal is to describe and predict reality. So if reality is keeping score for us, there's plenty of room left. Long before, the nightmare scenario that we are like not even worth being involved in the game at all at any level. Like long before that, maybe forever, it's going to be using science for what science does best. Can I make a material that has the following properties? Can I make an energy source that has the following properties? Can I prevent this disease? Can I treat this disease? Reality is the ultimate verifiable reward. And, so that's what keeps us honest. No one's going to care how you figured out the molecule that does X. That's just details. Raj and I, Rehaan, you were there too. All three of us were at NeurIPS doing a panel, and there was a guy in the audience, a guy named Togelius. He's a very famous games researcher, Swedish guy. He's really cool. And I think he was pumping it up just for effect. But he basically, in the Q&A after the talk, it was a panel of like AI science people building AI scientists. And founding companies that are doing automated science. And he was like shaking his fist, and he's like, what you're talking about is like really bad. He's like, the phrase that emerged from that was vibe science. If everyone's just going to be doing vibe science, then it drains the love away. It drains like why I'm doing science in the first place. Like that just sounds like a really boring, horrible life, and you're making it happen. And he was like half faking, half joking, but it was kind of a moment. And I think there's something in there. Like, it's true that, Francesco, there's a long history of tools of abstraction allowing us to go, higher and higher in the chain of abstraction, and gives us more scope and more power to do this activity of science. And engineering, broadly speaking, they're making things or making knowledge. And the problem is, like, just to use the analog of writing for a second, there comes a time when, like, there's no higher level to go, because the thing you need to do is convince another human of something. So, once a machine can write the thing and someone can have a machine read the thing, there's kind of nowhere else to go except go have a coffee in person and talk. And I think some areas of science could run into a problem where it all just feels trivial. Like, just who cares? That's a danger. So you need to keep it anchored to real world outcomes we all care about. So I think like no one's going to care about how you cured a disease. If AI did it entirely on its own, autonomously, great. Who's going to complain? That's fine. There's going to be a lot of churn economically about the humans involved in that. But at the end of the day, we should all care about the outcome. We know how to cure humans. What about though, like cosmology? So like my friend at Stanford, the theoretical physicist, like there, the good being produced is not a thing. It's not curing a disease. It's changing the perspective of humans about their place in the universe. That's the actual deliverable of something like cosmology. And if machines are writing all the papers and reading all the papers and they have some amazing view of the universe, how do we get in on that? So there is a limit that's a little weird with some certain parts of science where the whole purpose is just to change people's minds about reality. There's no tangible, there's nothing keeping score except human brains, right? If you haven't changed any human mind about their place in the universe, then you kind of haven't done anything. It's like if a paper gets written in the forest and no one's there to read it, did it even happen? Like, has the thing actually happened? And I think you can make an argument that the answer is yes, but it doesn't involve us. There is, in the limit, there are going to be machine scientists doing science in a privileged way that we won't have access to, unless, and this is Rehaan's point, unless we have better explainers. Unless like somehow
AI Carl Sagan,
the ability to bring a human along on an incredibly complex journey also gets incredibly better. And I can imagine that happening. I have a thought experiment that has kind of haunted me. I think it must have been seeded from some cool sci-fi short story of an answering machine, an oracle that can truly tell you anything. Have you ever thought about what you would ask an anything oracle? Like, and there's no time limit, and it's not 3 wishes. You can ask as much as you want. Like, some people would be like, well, I'm going to go get rich and ask it about, the future of the stock market. Others would be like, the past. Reveal to me the truth of history. Others would be, tell me how the universe really works and what its purpose is. Or others would be like, tell me how I can gain actual superpowers. And if you're a good person, how can I lift the rest of humanity? Or how can I dominate the rest of humanity if you're a bad guy? But what would you ask? And we may be building that oracle. And that's weird. That's just really weird. I don't know what life is like and our place in the universe. It sounds like humanity's purpose in a way was just to build this oracle. Like that was our whole point. All of the rest is just details, and who cares how you got here? So yeah, I don't know what you would ask, but I would definitely ask the oracle what the purpose of the universe is, and what its structure is, and what exists outside of the observable universe, and is it possible to access? And I want to know if you can visit the stars. It really pisses me off that we live in a universe with such stupid distances. Like the fact that you can observe like the history of the universe just at a glance in the night sky, especially if you have a really good telescope in space, but you can never get there, is a little annoying. That's probably the first thing I would ask is like, is that distance really a blocker? Is there some secret shortcut a la Star Trek that we should be exploiting? And of course, are we alone? It's probably the first thing you should ask. Is there other intelligence? And then, of course, the oracle would tell you that there's no such thing as now. We already know that, actually. Physics, unfortunately, has some bad news. There's no such thing as now. But
you wouldn't ask it how to live forever?
Maybe later.
Okay.
That might be like question 4.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, those who are building AI scientists, this is what should get them out of bed in the morning. This is the journey that you're on. It's not that like we're going to build a better molecule 3 times faster. It's that you're building the ultimate oracle. This is how you would build it. Literally, if our job today was to quit everything and try and build such an oracle, how would you do it? You would build an AI scientist. There's no other way. Probably the AI scientist is not the oracle, but it is the only tool that would get you. That's the only viable path to an oracle. There's no imaginable, you're not going to find one. They haven't been built. They're not just hanging around somewhere on the moon. So, we have to build it. And the only way to build it is to build a thing that knows how to build more complex things than we know how to build, including itself. It's the only path to the Oracle. Yeah. I wonder if we'll have the Oracle in our lifetime. Exponential curves are crazy, man. We could actually be the last generation.
I think it might feel like an oracle before it is one.
There'll be fake oracles. Like, frankly, on some days, Claude feels like a fake oracle. It can fool you.
I think the real oracle will come conveniently right after I die. Right.
Totally. I have that feeling as well. In the same way, like life extension. There's a notion that there's a curve of extending life extension. Like people are going to get older and older, and if you're born on just the right side of that wave, you're immortal.
Escape velocity.
I don't think I was born on the right side of that wave. I think like we're not going to solve entropy. And frankly, the notion of uploading is terrifying if you treat it properly. If you really think about what could go wrong, like infinite torture is not something that you can currently experience, and you could. So yeah, it's not cool.
Very interesting. I think John covered so many nuances, points, especially like human curiosity and machine curiosity. Something. This might be, I think, the last question of the session, because we have a separate audience question as well of last 15 minutes. So, John, you worked on this. There's this thing called chocolate hoax. Is one of the I find more interesting than the journal sting, honestly, because the journal was almost incidental. You published a real study, teeny, badly powered, and then actually thing you exposed was the press release and a newsroom's.
I had a music video. I also hired musicians to make a music video.
Oh, interesting. And it went around the world. So now last month, Nature ran an editorial saying that the future of science communication is not an article like that editorial. And as you mentioned, that it is changing very rapidly. Nature also mentioned that researchers are going to join even TikTok. So is credible science getting better at attention game actually a fix? Or does it just mean serious people now have to compete on exactly the terms that made your hoax work in the first place?
Well, I think it's great that scientists are on TikTok, because scientists are people.
Yeah.
I don't have any complaints. I am addicted to many scientists on YouTube. I love their content, and I think it's like a first-class deliverable of science, being able to create beautiful communication. Like if you had to choose between Veritasium existing and 20 labs that produce mid research that no one actually reads, I know what my choice would be. I keep on going back to this notion of reality keeping score. That's what's going to keep us honest. So, at the end of the day, what we call science, hopefully, will be anchored to the good it's supposed to deliver, which is mostly things in the real world going the way we want it. Better efficiency of things, better health outcomes, all the things that science does. Better prediction of reality in general is that's the business of the Oracle, is if we do X, what happens? That's not going to change anytime soon. So I think like reality keeps us honest, and the money that pays for all this science is kind of in a lucky way still chained to the outcomes. Like most money that pays for science today, with the weird exception of AI companies. AI companies are a kind of throwback to the Medici era, where you have, rich robber barons essentially, bankrolling some pretty amazing science. Astronomy back in the day, the fact that we know about the universe, it's mostly due to a few rich guys. In fact, not a few tyrants. And it's kind of like weird that we're doing this throwback thing. We're kind of doing that again. But aside from that outlier, most science is still paid for by taxes from democracies. And democracies with the capital to pay for science are going to keep on doing that. Like, you know, that's why democracy is so great for science. It is popular, current American politics aside, to pay for things like cancer research. We're still going to care about cancer, and thus we're still going to care about cancer research, and thus one way or another, those resources will go to, you know, paying for making that research happen. And will the actual activity that gets paid for look like publishing papers or paying for the salaries of people who spend half their time on TikTok? I don't know. And luckily, we kind of don't have to care, because by definition, the job will get done. One way or another, you know, it's self-correcting. Democracy, as long as it's democracy plus enough capital to pay for science plus an education system, kind of like a bunch of stuff has to go right. It's very easy to go into a dark age. Like the dark timeline is always waiting for you, one step away. You know, what's that phrase? The whole world is like 2 weeks away from, you know, if you lose food, like if agriculture collapses, or even the things that you get food to people, you have about 2 weeks, and then you basically lose what we've built for 5,000 years. I mean, that's a little terrifying. So a lot of stuff has to go right. But currently, you know, we have this amazing machine, and all the things are working, and all of these scientists are doing, I mean, it's such a luxury. We have people doing cosmology, like, you know, and it's because democracy has created a system that has revealed the value of curiosity-driven research. And, you know, every Carl Sagan that we produce keeps that system turning. You know, if you don't have a Carl Sagan, or these days a Veritasium, you actually are at great risk. So I would say, thank God we have scientists on TikTok, because that's part of the ecosystem that makes this whole thing work. And no one had to decide that. There isn't some genius making that happen. The economic, social system of science has taken care of it. It just defines the mechanisms that keep it moving. And thank goodness, because no one can organize this shit. So far so good. And the fact that people are on TikTok, and, you know, every once in a while a science journalist has to do some weird stunt in order to embarrass people for a little bit of self-correction. It's okay. That's apparently how the whole system works. You know, it's not efficient, but man, the outcomes are undeniable. Science is amazing. But yeah, the details are going to change and get really weird, especially with AI. But the overall shape of this endeavor should keep on going as is. I'm optimistic.
Very much makes sense. So there is this question, maybe Francesco, Rehaan, or Raj can answer. So, I mean, so people keep asking which is whether research is going private. And I think that question has actually moved because this month a US senator had to write a public letter asking a government body to resume publishing its evaluations of frontier models after an executive order in June set up a classified
It's evaluation of what?
benchmarking
What was the
process.
evaluation of?
Sorry? Oh, so there was this US senator had to write a public letter asking government body to resume publishing its evaluations of frontier models after an executive order in
Yeah, I
June set
remember
up, in a classified benchmarking process. So and there was this another piece couple of weeks back making the point that basically nobody outside and reportedly no many people inside can explain how the US government cleared the last frontier model for release. So it's not just going private, I think, but part of it are also going to be classified. Is science drifting from a publication regime to a clearance regime? And does the infrastructure, any of your building matter if it does? Francesco, Rehaan, yeah, you want that?
Chime in shortly, and then I would love to hear Francesco's thoughts on this. A quick line from me is like, this is why open science and research is important, that so much of the safety discussion around frontier models has been like safety washed by these frontier labs that you just can't have a discussion about it, even though there are important things to think about with the safety of models, open models. Like if everything is behind the four walls of these orgs that benefit economically from people knowing less about how these models work, then you just run into situations like this where, and I mean, people have advocated for new types of institutions where, these third-party institutions will work with the government and make decisions. But like, no doubt, all of this comes from a thriving open research ecosystem, right? Otherwise, I think none of this works. So that's my quick 2 cents there. But yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I think if you go back to the basics of science, the first point is that anybody could disprove, and you want this to be the case, what you're claiming, right? And that's kind of the key outer optimizer of the entire process, right? If you stop from being something you can falsify in the first place, then you stop actually advancing. So that's at least part of the fuel. To be fair, there's always been a chunk of science that has been kind of either partially or temporarily or even eternally, secret or concealed, and that's the unfortunate. That's the case when technology is incredibly disruptive. It's disruptive in directions that force the game theory of national security. And so that happens to be the case for AI. I was expecting it personally. I think we should have. I think the entire point is that a system in which we only have secret science is a system that is not advancing, if not in a very narrow path, which is roughly speaking the opposite of what we want to do with science, which is expand in all directions. And there is a kind of, let's say, emotional reason to go in that direction because you're curious, and maybe the machines will not be curious, and that's fine. But there's also a very practical reason, which is expanding a very narrow piece of science doesn't give rise as much to the incredible effects of science, which is the more you discover, the more there is to discover, and kind of the surface of discoverable stuff increases not linearly with the amount of stuff that you discover, and combinatorially with the amount of stuff that you can connect, so you can discover more stuff. And so this radial increase, if you want, is an incredibly valuable property of the world. And so it would be a shame to lose it, even just thinking practically and being utilitarian about it.
Very much. I think, open science is something we have to keep doing it for the sake of it, because since also the last day what happened was like there was a coalition of companies being announced, and US government is also trying to make the frontier of open AI to be more convincing as it could be. Also, I think we are past 20 minutes of our scheduled time. So thank you all of you. That was genuinely better than I hoped for. If there's one thing I'd want people to take away is basically, and again, this is for the students, is that every one of these systems, the old ones and the new ones, is a machine for allocating scarce judgment. So generating research has got cheap. The question has still got harder. Still not easier. So when you're working out when your own work should live, the useful question isn't where do people publish? It's who do I need to convince and what would actually convince them, and the kind of research judgment I should go through. Francesco, Rehaan, Raj, John, thank you so much for the time, and to everybody on the meet and watching the stream. Thanks for joining us. The recording at the link will go out afterwards. And there's more of CSC still to come. Have a good evening, afternoon, morning. Over to you, Dhruv.